So from my background of running these types of API programs and these data in motion microservice programs, one of the things that's always given me personally a huge headache is regulatory control and data leakage. So what we do here at X8, I worked very closely with X8 over my career, a bit outside of X8, is how can we plug into platforms, into API platforms, microservice platforms, data in motion platforms, whatever they may look like, and how can we make those platforms safe? So how can we make sure that the data that Ollie is requesting on this platform he's actually allowed to consume? That might be decided on the basis of Ollie's in the US, Rob's in the UK, and we've got to cross a geographic boundary and we've got regulatory controls to follow there. So how can we make sure that data remains compliant with those controls? Well, I mean, as I was saying there, regulatory compliance, it traditionally relies on businesses and technology teams coming together to agree upon and implement, obviously, those rules around that data sharing and storage. But it's got to be enforceable. So too often those rules are held as static documents, and it's especially that every project team, and in my experience, each project team, you have to bring a compliance person in, you have to understand the rule, you suddenly have to become a compliance expert in Schrems 2 or GDPR. And far too often we as technology teams, we're not compliance people. So by the ability of putting in a standardized, centralized capability that's constantly and always on, looking at the policies, looking at the data, looking at those distribution rules, we can pop that in the middle as a service. Your compliance people obviously feed the policies, the rules, the capability, and the technology teams just dip in and say, yep, this is what my data looks like. What do I need to do? So by shifting that centrally to the middle, this always on security, it's always on data privacy, it's always on regulatory control. Make sure your entire organization is covered by the same rules, regardless of whether you read them off a SharePoint document or a Word document or whatever. These rules are there, they've been approved and they're centralized, and everybody's using the same rules over and over and over again.
Typically helping like large financial institutions actually come and evaluate tech in a more meaningful way. It's not necessarily just calling an API and going, yep, that works, but rather actually being able to see the full infrastructure, being able to test the infrastructure. And then, for instance, if a bank wanted to come in and say, Rob, we'd love to be able to explore how you're encrypting stuff, they'd actually be able to come in and see actually they're not going to be able to break that encryption. They can go ahead and validate that piece.